Is it a stretch to say that the PS2 enjoyed the greatest longevity of any console, well, ever? Year after year, the system saw revolutionary games that would change the industry. Comparing the earliest PS2 games to the latest shows an incredible technical leap you wouldn't expect from tech as old as that cursed D&D movie. I want to see you defenders for that movie down in the comments, if you exist. But even as we moved into the HD era, the PS2 was still getting games. Some of them good, some of them weird, and some of them you just have to wonder what they were thinking. In an industry where ballooning budgets and unrealistic expectations have become the norm, you might be surprised to hear that D3 Publisher built an entire brand of low-budget games sold at low prices. It's right there in the name. The simple 2,000 games for the PS2 all cost 2,000 yen each at launch. These games are hit and miss in terms of quality, but developers being able to play about a bit meant some of them ended up as secret experimental grounds for pretty interesting ideas. Volume 113 is one such example. The Taiyo Jigoku, or the Overwhelming Hell in English, that's sick as hell, is one part bizarre take on Alice in Wonderland and one part survival horror game. It came out in February 2007, the same month as the first Resistance game. Bring back Resistance, go on. The premise is simple. Schoolgirl Erica has forgotten her cell phone at school, and when she goes to get it, a white rabbit yoinks it. When she follows it into a portal, she ends up in another world, one filled with not delicious jam, but horrors. Oof. From there, the game takes a stage-based approach. Erica must enter a portal to hell, sneak past or struggle against swarms of insects, rats, spirits or other creatures, and track down the rabbit to find letters that unveil the game's story, as well as keys that unlock access to boss fights. The game may have been constrained by low budgets and a fast turnaround time, but it stands apart due to its unique premise. It kind of slightly resembles A Plague Tale, a full decade before that game, and its rats took the industry by swarm. Hey, here's an idea. Next game. As games like Super Robot Wars will show you, the strategy RPG genre is a popular canvas for crossovers. Developer Idea Factory tried their hand at this as well, throwing franchises like Shadow Hearts, Growlancer, Gungrave and Spectral Souls into a blender to create their own SRPG. Released in June 2008, the same month as Metal Gear Solid 4, Chaos Wars presents a pretty neat twist on the usual SRPG proceedings. Rather than use grid-based movement and positioning, characters can move more freely than usual. It's a nice and flexible system, but that's not why we're here today. If you're allergic to bad voice acting, then chances are you winced when we mentioned the name Chaos Wars. What would have otherwise been a decent, still kind of forgotten crossover SRPG was made infamous thanks to a horrifically bad English dub.
So, can you move, Uru? Karen?
Wow, I really can't move my body.
What did you do, Nicole?
Ben Starr is in ruins listening to that. The rushed and unpolished localization didn't help, but this story gets truly wild if you closely examine the game's manual. You see, right, Western publisher O3 Entertainment CEO is named Chris Jelinek, and in the manual's voice acting credits and special thanks sections you'll see several people who share that last name, implying that Jelinek brought in family members to voice the game instead of hiring professional actors. What a thing to imply.
You probably don't understand the logic, but you can feel the effects, no?
The result was certainly chaotic, if nothing else. In the mid to late 2000s, video game ports were often like a box of chocolates, or symbiotes. You'd never know what you'd get. Case in point, Spider-Man Web of Shadows. While the PC and 7th generation consoles all received the same open world adventure, the PS2 and PSP release, the Amazing Allies Edition, is a 2.5D side-scrolling brawler released on October 21st, 2008. Fallout 3 would come out a week later, just for reference. Question time, this iconic game also came out in October 2008. What is it? Let me know down below, and you could win a Steam key for free. While all releases of Web of Shadows feature moral choices and a story revolving around a symbiote invasion of Manhattan, this version diverges pretty dramatically in its actual plot. Web of Shadows on PS2 features relatively simple beat-em-up combat and builds on that foundation with a power-up system that allows you to change abilities and summon allies. Ooh, it's got Luke Cage. And that's all I can say about it, really, to be honest. If you were young when you played it, you may have a soft spot for amazing allies, but this is overall a very, very basic budget Spider-Man game made for about 50 quid in 3 weeks. They could only afford a simple text box for the ending after all. It's not the worst game of all time, but it's not like amazing. Ultimate. No Way Home. Let's leave the streets of Manhattan behind and fly off to space for this next game. Despite being inherently repetitive, the allure of stomping ass as Lu Bu in Dynasty Warriors has endured for over 2 decades. It is the ultimate power fantasy. The template has proven popular enough to land over a dozen crossovers with different franchises, one of which happens to be the iconic Gundam franchise. Dynasty Warriors Gundam and its 2 sequels take the basic idea of Gundam and make it cooler by putting you in a giant mecha. That'll do it. This actually gives these games an interesting twist. Player characters consist of both a pilot and a Gundam, and mixing and matching the two can give rise to a variety of combinations with different effects. Dynasty Warriors Gundam 2 improves the formula by fixing enemy AI and giving players a much larger roster to pick from, and while there are some compromises like fewer enemies on screen at a time compared to the PS3 version, the PS2 version is still able to hold its own as a viable version of the game. Not bad at all for a PS2 game that came out a month after Resident Evil 5. As with many other Dynasty Warriors games, despite the poor critical reception, the game has developed its own dedicated fan following that appreciates what it was able to achieve. And hey, these next games were ambitious on a national scale, but in a different way. While Japan, Europe and the US are dominant forces in game development, that hasn't stopped other countries like India from throwing their hats into the ring. Unfortunately for the Indian studios who tried their hand, a lack of experience and budget means that none of these games are what analysts call good. I'm not going to talk about Ra 1 again just yet, I'm not emotionally recovered enough, but that does belong here too. First up is Hanuman Boy Warrior, a third-person action game starring the titular deity. Developed by Arona in only 10 months, this 2009 release is India's first PS2 game. That makes it all the more unfortunate that its visuals and gameplay are worse than even the system's launch titles from nearly a decade before. The combat is a bland and broken mess, and the camera is as reliable as the modern box office. The story won't save the experience either, because it's marred by horrendous voice acting in both English and Hindu. Another Indian game released in 2009 was Chandragupta Warrior Prince, a Prince of Persia-esque 2.5D platformer that first appeared on the PSP before coming to PS2 in 2011. Chandragupta does have some interesting ideas, such as ranged attacks that can strike enemies in the background or foreground, and RPG elements. Unfortunately, this game also falls apart where it really matters, playing it. The game balancing makes most good gear too expensive to buy, and the level design is both punishing and outright deceptive, like a certain prince during TV interviews. Last up is Dawn 2, which, like the other 2 games, was published by Sony Computer Entertainment, making it, yes, a first-party title. That's interesting to think about, isn't it? Its 2013 release date makes it the final first-party release for the PS2, but unlike its absolutely insane source material, it fails to go out with a bang. On starting the game, you'll notice it's just completely off. You're presented with low-budget and sloppy comic book-style cutscenes before the game abruptly drops you into its world and you press buttons and things move. Sometimes. This came out the same year as The Last of Us, by the way, which is great. As with the other 2 indie exclusive, Dawn 2's visuals are far below the standards you'd expect from a late PS2 game, especially one published by Sony. Shootouts are clunky, with your opponents being unintelligent AI. They make the Will Smith spaghetti thing look like Da Vinci. But you know what, despite these games' faults, it's still a shame India never really tried to enter the console market again. Guess they didn't have the secret ingredient. While Insomniac Games had already moved on to the PS3 back in 2006 with Resistance, bring back Resistance, High Impact Games ensured the iconic Lombax and Robot duo still had a couple more outings on the PSP than later with PS2 ports. Secret Agent Clank, a game based on an in-universe TV show, also marks the final Ratchet & Clank game released for the PS2. It came out in May 2009, the same month as Minecraft and Modern Warfare 2. Kinda nuts. So what's it like? Well, Clank's gameplay segments in the mainline titles are typically brief, puzzle-orientated segments designed to break up the pace, but Secret Agent Clank gives the tiny robot melee combos and a selection of gadgets, bringing his playstyle more in line with his Lombax counterpart. As befitting the game's spy theme though, Clank will have to channel his inner James Bond from time to time, using quick time events to perform stealth takedowns and a hollow monocle to disguise himself as his enemies. Unfortunately, even at its concise runtime of less than 10 hours, Secret Agent Clank is bogged down a bit by segments featuring Ratchet and Captain Quark. And also, it's a PSP port. It's not the prettiest game on PS2, especially compared to some of the technical marvels we'd see late on in the console's life. Yeah, not an awful game by any means, but it's still a rare misstep in an otherwise fantastic series of platformers. Right, time to summon the next super late PS2 game. Spend enough time immersed in any genre and you're bound to start coming across the more niche stuff. Hidden among the many strategy RPGs you'll find in the wild is the Summon Night series, an SRPG franchise with visual novel elements that's been mostly trapped in Japan. Despite the obscurity, Summon Night as a series has done well enough for itself to warrant a host of spin-offs, one of which you guys loved seeing in our GBA video. Unfortunately, just like Swordcraft Story 2, Summon Night Grand Thieves released long after the ship sailed for next-gen consoles, being a PS2 game released in March 2010. Not only did Summon Night Grand Thieves never leave Japan, and I'm not saying its full name because that will cause an international incident, it's obscure even within its home country, with little in the way of significant media coverage at all. And that's a shame, because the few people who were actually exposed to it found it to be a decent, if not groundbreaking, action RPG. The combat is fun but lacking in depth, the presentation's a bit bland and underwhelming for 2010, but the soundtrack is solid, and surprisingly enough, the pleasing character art was drawn by none other than Katsumi Inami, whose style you might recognise from the Star Ocean and Trail series. Who knows, maybe a future mainline game will break into the mainstream and then we'll get remasters of the spin-offs, including this forgotten action RPG curio. For now, so long to this super late PS2 game. Among the more forgotten parts of Sega's catalogue of IPs is the Sakura Wars franchise. The series is set in an alternate 1920s period where Japan has created a military unit of giant mecha to fight back against demons. The Sakura Wars series built its entire identity around the blend of love and war. On the battlefield, you're engaged in turn-based strategy battles with a host of mecha, and in your downtime you'll be spending time with the heroines who pilot them, you cheeky dog. The series' live and interactive picture system adds more pressure than usual, with time limits for dialogue choices and the ability to hear characters' internal monologues. Your relationships with the ladies also directly affects their performance in battle and vice versa. So Long My Love, the fifth entry, takes the action to 1928 New York, as Greenhorn Shinjiro Tiger is sent there by his uncle to help lead the Star Division and is forced to prove himself when demons attack. As far as late era PS2 games go, it was well received, but unfortunately sold poorly. It was also localized for the Wii at the same time, and that might be where you recognize it from. While the Sakura Wars series received another entry in 2019, that game shifted towards action RPG gameplay instead, leaving SRPG fans with this game as the last one in the series that stays true to its roots. It's been in the shadows ever since. Before they gave us Days Gone, what a whipper. Ben Studio were the stewards of Siphon Filter, a third-person shooter series where he plays an agent out to stop those bloody rascal terrorists. While there's certainly stealth in this series, there's also a lot more room for a guns blazing approach, or all tasers tasing. Our mission target for today is Siphon Filter Logan Shadow, the sixth and final installment of the series and direct sequel to Dark Mirror. Released in 2007 for the PSP, the game would eventually make its way to the PS2 in June 2010. I may as well keep doing this. It came out after Red Dead Redemption. That's nuts. Logan Shadow begins when a new terrorist group, Al Jamil, attacks, with our hero Gabe Logan being sent out to intercept and prevent them from getting access to classified information. Siphon Filter Dark Mirror laid the groundwork in pushing for a more character-centric story, and as the finale to the series, Logan Shadow follows that trend, thanks to the help of graphic novel writer Greg Rucka. Logan Shadow also improved cover systems, melee combat, and added underwater skirmishes. Going by the game's reviews, it was able to stick the landing as the final title in the series, but we wish Sony would go on a quest to revive this franchise. It's been ages. Some long-running franchises mature with their audiences, targeting older players with darker themes. The Lord of the Rings Aragorn's Quest, however, takes the exact opposite approach, cramming the entire plot of the film trilogy into one game and makes it more kid-friendly in the process. 15 years after the fall of Sauron, Samwise Gamgee recounts the adventures of Aragorn to his children. Sean Astin even returns to voice Sam, but they just reuse Viggo's voice from the films. He was probably busy saving a horse from a volcano or something. What a good guy. What a guy. For one last time, this game came out in the same month as Bungie's final Halo game, Halo Reach. Neither they or Halo have been at the best since, have they? But is Aragorn's Quest the best? No. On the Wii and PS3, Aragorn's Quest is a traditional action-adventure game. The PS2, PSP and DS, on the other hand, received a linear isometric action RPG complete with stats and EXP. You don't need to do a single second of number crunching here though. Aragorn's Quest is a repetitive and pretty basic button masher, and the RPG systems make the game far too easy in its later stages. That the PS2 and PSP version appears to be a port of the DS version is kinda damning. Only a few enemies can be on screen at once due to hardware limitations. It makes the PS2 version, which could have handled something more intensive, feel pretty empty to look at. Regardless of platform, however, the reviews for Aragorn's Quest indicate that it isn't in fact the one game to rule them all. It would rule if you watched the outro though. Outro gang, yes, I did get a haircut, and yes, I do look just like Orlando Bloom. I just wanted to qualify. What's the word? I keep forgetting it. Clarify, not bloody racing, clarify that I wanted to cover late PS2 games. It doesn't have to be the latest, but they're just ones that came out after the PS3. I'm kind of interested. Do you want to see me do the same for the PS1? I skipped the PS1 for some reason. Or do you want to see me do, I don't know, the Wonders one? Well, you Wonders one sickos, get down in the comments below and let me know. I've been Jim for Culture Vultures. These have been the lovely members, and thank you for watching. Corey.